How you doing? Hello and welcome back to the Educated Collins staff channel. Today we're going to be doing Ravonna's first impressions. We're going to be talking about my thoughts on the cards, spotlights, some deck builds. Always try to do that. So we do have some pretty interesting deck builds and just some potential buffs, nerfs if needed for the card, and just what I think about it moving forward. Should be an interesting one. So let's begin. So Ravonna is a 3 energy, 3 power card. Ongoing, your cards with 1 or less power cost 1 less, minimum 1. Kind of different than Loki, like Zabu, right? Has that minimum 1 requirement. I think that kind of makes sense because there's a ton of 1 drops with 1 or less power, so that would be a very like hard to balance function where you could just spam 1 drops for free. So makes sense. Synergizes with some decks. Ongoing Surfer, Cerebro, Disruption. Kind of more arbitrary synergistic style, because it's not really synergized based on its power. It's synergized based on what other cards could play with it, combo it, get the discount basically. So it's not like, oh yeah, this just works in control decks because it's a control tool. This just, what cards cost 1? Okay, well, you could play this. That's really how you look at it. When it comes to the power level, should you buy, all that kind of things, I wouldn't necessarily say it's been the most high performing card. I just, like right now the meta is Loki and Galactus and then some kind of tech cards. I wouldn't necessarily say this is able to compete really well into those matchups. So when you go into like high elo, you really don't see this at all. It seems more of a fun card right now. So I just, like, in terms of like meta, would I buy it for the meta? I really wouldn't. I do not recommend. This is the same idea I had at the beginning of the month with the Spotlight tier list. Hasn't really changed too much. It's not a card that, it's a combo card, which I value a lot less generally nowadays, just because it's hard to guarantee the consistency of combo cards. And it's also in a meta where it isn't designed to shine, in that there's a lot of cards, there's a lot of decks that really don't really care about what you're doing with Ravonna, or even the payoff you get with Ravonna isn't like better than an Goliath, right? It's not better than a Loki discounting your whole deck. So even though it has potential to be playable, to be good, right now it's not the meta for it. And if you're low on resources, this is not something I would spend resources on. Now, there is something to be noted about the way secondary buffs and cards that don't do well initially really badly do get some buff potentials, and I could definitely see this being something that gets buffed. They also had a they also commented about buffing the card already, so it's something that is potential. We're going to talk about what the buff could be, or something they're looking into, but that would be a reason to get this. If you look at the buff we talk about and you're like, oh, I would maybe consider playing this if it was buffed in this way, then you could get this card in hopes of that happening. And then when it does, you don't have to go back and scramble 3k tokens or anything like that. So that's an argument where I'm like, okay, I can see that being a reason to get this card. But if you're just looking at it as a 3/3 with this ability, and you're like, oh, I really want it for this reason, would it really say that's the best approach? That's my opinion for sure. Some of the synergies we do have, right? Iron Man, I think, is a very popular synergy. You play this on 3, Iron Man on 4. That seems pretty good. Null works in the same way. Null usually 6, be 5. Play that for good follow up. Things like Green Goblin, right? It has negative power. So Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, they work here, where you can get 2 power Green Goblin, which is not bad. Ironheart, I think, is a pretty good card anyways. It's a 2/6 with upside, and if you, I mean, it's a 3/6 upside. If you make it a 2/6 upside, that's pretty darn strong. Silver Surfer, Ravonna's a 3-drop, and a lot of cards that you target already are also 3-drops, so pretty easy to slot Ravonna in and have a good amount of synergy, so not a bad pickup. Cerebro is something people have been trying. I've also looked into Cerebro list. I do have a Cerebro list in the builds, and I think it makes sense. You know, like yeah, this list makes sense to me. You know, whether I would play it in high meta, you know, questionable, but do you think it's a fun list, makes sense, and then has some good potential. Darkhawk, Mystique, these cards, Patriot as well, right? These are like core combo cards or core build around cards, and then you can just like have Ravonna to make it a little bit cheaper, you know. So definitely some interesting ideas with it. I do think it's still being fleshed out. I don't think we've seen like the peak of Ravonna deck building right now, but it's a fun card, and it's a card that could potentially get much stronger with time passes as they add more cheaper cards. It's kind of like Zabu-esque, kind of like Surfer-esque, where every time a card is added into the game, you have to think, oh, how does this work with Ravonna? Like that's a new deck design decision that you have to keep in mind every single time a card gets added to the game. So pretty cool. Don't mind it for sure. When we talk about potential busts, right, there have been some people that are saying, oh, this card isn't that strong. What do you think about buffing it to like a two cost card? So making it a 2/3 or maybe a 2/2 or something like along those lines, right? So we do have a response from Dinner. They said it was a close decision. So it's something they have tested. Yeah, right. With that statement. And cost reduction is an effect that they tend to am more cautious on. I mean, I don't really believe that, right? Like you could see Loki, they didn't do that, right? Like, but I do think like in essence, like they're willing to nerf cost reduction cards unless it's a season pass that they need to sell. But other than that, like they have been pretty good with Wave. They've been pretty good with some of the other stuff, like making sure it's like not super broken. If we miss the mark here, 2 costs among the first adjustments we'll consider. So yeah, they're definitely considering making this a 2 cost card, which I do think makes it a lot better. It means that you could definitely ramp it earlier. It means negative becomes a very powerful combo instead of Zob. You can also run both of them and see if that works out. So there's definitely some potential here for it to be pretty good. So that is something you could say, oh, with those changes. Oh, I forgot to sorry. Chat's like, I mean, there's no chat, but if chat was there, you'd be like, I can't read it. You know, I hear you. But there are some potential changes that are possible to be made with this card, and that could definitely increase the power level of it. So that's definitely something to consider if you are interested in this card and you're like, ooh, as a 2-drop, this is really enticing. Then I could see, yeah, getting it. But other than that, like I think as it currently stands, there's not a big enough upside to warrant playing this over anything happening. And also Mobius is coming out, right? Like that's always the big bad boogie monster. Like, hey, Mobius is gonna come out and this card's gonna be even worse than it is. And it's not that good right now. And it's just slotted to get worse. So, you know, it's hard to say, hey, yeah, this is a card you really want to spend your resources on. So I'm just not super enticed to recommend it. It's a card that I think is super exciting, and it's a card I was most excited to see. But in terms of like, hey, would I recommend other people spend your resources? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't do that. So yeah. And then when we move on to the spotlight tier list is so that I made for it, right? I would say like I'd stick with what I made for the spotlight tier list. You can see it's Ravonna, Zabu, Jean Grey. Spotlights are cool, right? Zabu is variant's pretty cool. I've definitely seen a lot of comments about that, but still think it's not super worth, right? Keep in mind, Zabu is a series 4, so is Ravonna is a series 4, so that's 6,000 tokens, and then Jean Grey series 5, right? So it's a pretty cheap spotlight compared. Usually they're like 15,000 tokens, so this one is particularly cheaper than normal. And then just in terms of the power level of the cards, wouldn't really say like this is something you have to get. Jean Grey is very skippable right now. If it got an adjustment, maybe not. But right now, it's very skippable. We don't need it really in any composition. Zabu's good, but Mobius is coming out. Same thing with Ravonna. Mobius is coming out, so that's gonna put a hamper on really those Zabu decks that are doing well, and Ravonna decks that are okay right now. So you really don't have a lot of time to play with this, and that's just like not a card, not something you want to spend your resources on. Hey, you could play this for a week, maybe, and even then, it's not that good because you're losing to Galactus. So I just don't really see the appeal in terms of like focusing on it spotlight wise, but there's definitely reasons for sure. And if you like the card, like don't let me stop you, right? Like if you like the card, nothing beats your fun. You know what I mean? Like if this is gonna increase your fun playing with this card, go for it. Who cares? Like, because I'm just kind of looking at it from progression standpoint. Now I do have decks for this. Like I always try for the new cards, have some decks, some ideas if I can, if it makes sense to me. We do have a couple. First one I think is the one people have been playing and having the most success with. They're just using Darkhawk. So the interesting thing about this list is there's no Zabu, right? So because you've gotten away from having to rely on 4-drops, right? So there's only one 4-drop, which is Darkhawk, right? Rockslide used to be a 4-drop as well, so it made a ton of sense to play it for, because that's 2 base cards, and then you just play like Shang-Chi, right? And then you have 3, and then you're happy. Here, you don't really need to do that. So we've taken out the Zabu, put Ravonna in, kind of the new Zabu. Let you play Iron Man Mystique, which is great, and just let you play Black Widow for 1, which is also pretty good. So you just get a little bit more synergy in the Darkhawk engine while just running like good cards. So Bishop's good. Wolfbang is a 2/7 if you're playing it in the final lane. So that's not bad at all. So there's just a lot of like good small cards to add on top of this. So that's kind of the idea with this. This one's been doing okay. So if you want to play Ravonna and nothing's been working for you, I would say this is the one that probably has the best chance of having success. So that's something I wanted to toss in here. Next up, we have Junk version. So, for all the Galactus haters out there, this is definitely for you. The Loki matchup's probably, it's probably okay, but maybe like this is definitely a Galactus. Hey, if you're seeing a ton of Galactus and you want to play Ravonna, I think the cool thing here is you get to play 2-power morph, which is not bad. Like 2-power morph is actually not a bad card since you can hit like 4/5s, and usually people toss out their early game first. Generally, I would say like there's a lot of snow guard and stuff like that, so there's a good chance you might hit like a snow guard target. So that's like the downside. But morph, in general, like if you're into other matchups, like could be a big swinger. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then you have the regular combos, Debris, Viper stuff, like nothing crazy. The big discounts are the Goblins and Ironheart. I would say those are like the really big payoffs, and then the other stuff is like okay. And then you have Eliath, just because all you need to do is lock one lane, Eliath the other, right? Like that's a lot easier to do, especially with Sentry. You could do it pretty easily. So that's something you can try if you want to play it in this. You don't like playing into Galactus matchups. Next up, we have Negative Surfer. I think this is like what people wanted to play Ravonna the most with. Negative Surfer. This used to be the most popular deck, so it's not surprising that there's still a lot of people that still like playing or want to play it and improve on it in any way they can. So people have been trying it out in the Negative Surfer list. I do think it's awkward that if you play Ravonna, like you discount the Surfer, but you discount the negative, but like negative is gonna be played on 4 anyway, so it doesn't do anything. So that's like where I'm like, but I could definitely see how it works with the other cards you're using. But generally, I'm not like I don't see the synergy. Like, oh yeah, I'm playing Ravonna because Iron Man's cheaper. Yeah, I guess, but you're not playing Bask, right? And I think Bask helps a lot in this type of deck, since if you don't draw a negative, like at least you can Bask at Iron Man, Bast, Mystique. I guess if you're not ironing, you're not mistaking anyway. So that kind of thing. But like I see a lot of people playing this. I understand it. I don't love it though. I think there's better Ravonna decks out there. But I just had to mention that a lot of people are playing it with negative Surfer. And then we have the regular Surfer. This one I do get. You don't have negative anymore. This one I'm down for, where you just have a bunch of other synergies. I do like Forge being 1 mana. It means you can go like Ravonna on 3, Forge Brood on 4, which is pretty good in 1 turn. You have the Forge Brood Absorbing Man combo, which is always a nice thing to have in these type of decks. And then, Green Goblin doesn't mess. So sometimes with the Brood Absorbing Man, you run out of space. I do like you get Green Goblin, which doesn't mess with your space in particular. So definitely okay with this list here. Wong is Wong, I get it. Wong people will keep Wonging along. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, that's another list I do think is pretty cool. And then the last list I do have is a Cerebro list, which I think I spent the most time on this list. Just making sure it makes logical sense to me. But I like this. So we take out Bass. That's something that's normally in Cerebro 3. But you do get to play, since it doesn't work with Ravonna, you do get to play Iron Man, which I think just makes sense because Iron Man Mystique turn 6 is always good. And you do have Snowguard instead of early game. Snowguard I think is like good because you get 2-3 drops. And you can kill Monger it away if you need to. Or you can Valkyrie it to up to a 3. So it's not bad. You still have Valkyrie, so you can still buff up your Iron Man. You can still buff up your Cerebros and Mystiques, all that if you want to do that. And you just have a lot of good tech cards. Shadow King works well. Shang-Chi, Valkyrie, all good tech. Killmonger in the Loki matchups also pretty good tech. And you have the Invisible Woman if you need it. If you need to do like, last turn Killmonger or something like that. Last turn Shadow Kings. Last turn Valkyries, I guess, if you want to do it that way. There's definitely ways to use Invisible Woman. Just gives some scary cats. So I kind of like this list. Think it makes sense. We're not running Sentinel is a common thing. We're also not running Magic. I could definitely see taking out Killmonger, putting Magic in if you like Magic better. So that's something to consider. But thought it was a cool list. Makes sense to me. So those are kind of the Ravonna decks we have here. See if you decide to get it, see if any of them you like. Always like hearing people say, "Hey, Collins, this deck worked out for me," and I'm like, yeah. Even though like the last list I made, I think there's a better. Like I talked about in the previous video, I think the other list with Iron Lad is better because Iron Lad with Electro, I think just makes sense because you have so many good hits with a ramp deck. So other than that, that's my thoughts on Ravonna. Not the strongest card right now. Looks like they're already considering changing it, buffing it to a 2-drop, which I think will make it a lot better. But if you do like it, has some cool things. It's a very interesting card. It's a card that also will affect deck design going forward. So definitely hopes to see, but we're all kind of waiting for Mobius and seeing how that really impacts the meta. I do think people are finding the Galactus low-key meta annoying, but people always do that. Anything that's like stronger than normal, people find annoying. Especially, I think Galactus is fair because it definitely messes with agency on your part if they have the setup. So that feels annoying if you can't do anything at all, which it does. But other than that, that is generally how the meta usually shakes out. So hope you guys enjoy it. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day.
EducatedCollins snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow snap. Your skills will be